Ronell was just stocking shelves when a cop burst in demanding his ID. No reason, no charge. What unfolded next transformed a routine grocery shift into a moment the internet, and the entire town, would never forget. Ronald Price was a man of quiet habits, yet almost universally liked. Dependable, reserved, always punctual for his shift. For nearly 4 years he'd been a fixture at Maplebrook Market in Anniston, Alabama. Never a problem, never an unexcused absence. That Tuesday around 2:45 p.m. he was humming a Meshigo tune under his breath, unloading boxes of green beans and cornmeal. The produce section was pristine. Labels forward, no blemish, pallets neatly stacked. He didn't even register the police cruiser until someone murmured, "Yo, what's a cop doing here?" At first he brushed it off. Sometimes customers forgot wallets or there was a minor disturbance. But then the officer strode past the registers, the bakery, the meat counter, heading straight for him. "Let me see your ID," the officer stated flatly. No badge displayed, no context, no greeting. Ronald looked up from the pallet jack, his brows furrowed. "Excuse me." "I said let me see your ID," the officer repeated, his hand already on the radio strapped to his vest. Now Ronald saw his nameplate, T. Huxley. A fresh face, maybe late 20s, trying too hard to project authority. He stood with an air of self-importance. "What's this about?" Ronald's voice was calm, direct. "Am I being accused of something?" Huxley didn't respond. Instead, his gaze swept the aisle as if searching for anything, any justification for his presence. He took a step closer. "You match a description, that's all I'm saying." "Description of what?" "I don't have to answer that right now," Huxley snapped. "ID, now." Heads began to turn. The woman at the deli paused mid-slice. A mother with a toddler in her cart froze. Ronald's co-worker, Terrence, peered from the stockroom. Ronald remained still. "I've been here since 11. You can check the clock and logs. I'm not handing over my ID unless you explain why." Huxley's tone sharpened, amplified. "I'm giving you a lawful order. Do you want to add obstruction to this?" It was loud enough for everyone to hear, and the tension in the produce aisle went from awkward to electric. Ronald didn't move. His pulse quickened, but his eyes stayed locked on the officer. "Sir, I don't even know what you're talking about. I work here." "I didn't ask where you work." Huxley shot back. "Now stop stalling and give me the ID." A click. Someone started recording. That sound seemed to spark a chain reaction. 3 more phones lifted, capturing the scene. Ronald felt his jaw clench, but his voice remained steady. "Then call your supervisor because this feels like harassment." Huxley hesitated, a brief flicker of uncertainty that didn't go unnoticed. It gave Ronell a moment to breathe, though the officer immediately tried to mask it with feigned authority. "Fine," Huxley muttered. "Don't cooperate. I'll file the report and handle it from there." But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Before things could escalate further, a new presence entered the fray. And she wasn't one to back down. Tanya Belrose didn't tolerate nonsense. Not in her store, not with her staff, and certainly not from outsiders who thought they owned the place. She'd worked at Maplebrook Market for 21 years, seen every kind of customer and incident. But watching an officer badger one of her best employees for ID without a stated charge? Her blood boiled. She emerged from the side hallway where she'd been reviewing the delivery schedule, her low heels clicking purposefully on the tile. "Is there a problem here?" Tanya asked, standing shoulder to shoulder with Ronell. Her tone was even, but her eyes spoke volumes. The officer turned to her, still rigid. "This is a police matter." Tanya folded her arms. "This is my store and that's my employee. What exactly is the issue?" Huxley glanced around. Too many eyes watching, phones still raised. A teenage boy near the oranges was live streaming. He knew he was caught. So he tried to double down. "I said this individual matches a description," he barked. "I have the right to request ID." Tanya didn't blink. "You haven't said what he's suspected of and you didn't ask, you demanded." Ronald, still silent beside her, quietly added, "I clocked in at 11:02. Haven't left the store once." Tanya nodded. "And I verified that 5 minutes ago when I came off the register. He's been between dairy and produce all afternoon." Huxley shifted his weight. "We had a call about a theft nearby. The caller said it might have been someone in a dark hoodie." Tanya pointed at Ronell. He's wearing a blue company vest, name badge on full display. His hoodie is in the break room locked up. Want me to get it? A wave of murmurs rippled through the onlookers. Someone whispered, "This is ridiculous." An older man with a white beard shook his head, muttering, "What kind of police work is this?" The officer tried to regain control. "He still fits the general profile." Profile? Tanya interrupted. "Do you have a height? Weight? Build? Specific clothing? Is anything more than a black man in a hoodie? Because that's not a profile, officer. That's an excuse." Silence descended. People held their breath. Phones remained aloft. Tanya pressed on, leaning forward just slightly. "You didn't walk over to anyone else in this store. You walked straight to him. Didn't ask any questions, just demanded ID." "I have procedures." Huxley snapped. "So do I," Tanya replied coolly. "And one of them is protecting my staff when they're being harassed without cause." The officer's jaw twitched. For a second he looked like he might call for backup, but he stayed put. Ronald noticed his eyes flicker to the ceiling cameras, clearly aware that every angle was being recorded. Then a new voice joined the standoff. From behind the spice rack near aisle 4, a man stepped forward, holding a basket with just 2 items: coffee and a box of oatmeal. He was tall, older, with wire-rimmed glasses and a quiet calm. "Excuse me," the man said gently. "I couldn't help but overhear." "I'd like to ask you something, officer." Trent Huxley turned to him. "Who are you?" "My name is Julian Ocampo," the man replied. "I'm a retired attorney. Civil rights law mostly. And I just want to know something simple. What's your reasonable suspicion here? Because unless this man is actively suspected of a specific crime under Alabama Code May 1530, he has no legal obligation to produce identification. Not unless he's driving, and certainly not if he's just doing his job." The air in the store changed. Julian continued, calm, clear, without aggression, just facts. "And while I'm here," he added, gesturing to the crowd, "there are at least 9 people recording this encounter. If this ends up in court, which it might, everything said here will matter." For the first time, Officer Huxley's confidence visibly cracked. His jaw set, but his words came slower. "I'm just trying to follow up on a report," he muttered. "Then follow up properly," Julian stated. "Because this man deserves that. And so does this community." Officer Huxley wasn't accustomed to being challenged like this, and his next move spoke volumes. The air in the produce aisle became heavy, thick with unspoken tension. It wasn't loud, but it was stifling. Officer Huxley surveyed the scene. Phones still filming, Tanya unyielding, Julian calm but legally sharp, and Ronald simply standing there, arms at his sides, unwavering. Instead of de-escalating, Huxley took a small, deliberate step toward Ronald. His hand didn't go for his gun, but it hovered near his utility belt. A quiet gasp rippled from somewhere near the bananas. Ronald's voice remained steady. "You're really going to stand here and try to intimidate me for doing my job?" That's when Tanya moved, not quickly but close enough that Huxley noticed. She stepped directly between them. "Back off." She didn't yell or whisper. She stated it like an undeniable truth, daring anyone to dispute it. "You're not going to corner one of my employees in the middle of my store like he's committed a crime when you don't even have the decency to explain what you're doing." Huxley looked like he might retort, but Tanya leaned in slightly. "I've got every clock and timestamp, aisle camera, and break log you could ask for. I will print it all out and I will walk it to the precinct myself." Behind her, Ronald exhaled through his nose. Not fear but exhaustion. Tired of this scene, tired of having to remain calm to protect himself when someone else was losing control. "You know what's wild?" Ronald said quietly. "My little cousin just had to do a whole essay on the Fourth Amendment about unreasonable searches. And here I am living the example." Huxley straightened his shoulders as if about to deliver a clever retort, but Tanya cut him off. "You want to know what your presence is doing right now?" she asked. "You're scaring that child in the cereal aisle. You've stopped half my store from checking out. And you've got people who've been shopping here for years watching you like you're the problem, not him." Julian added, "And that should tell you something." Still Huxley stood there, the words hanging. He knew he was being watched. He knew every second was being filmed. And something behind his eyes began to shift, a slow realization that he'd walked into something he wasn't prepared for. That's when Mrs. Yvette Harmon, a longtime shopper who'd probably spent more time at Maplebrook than some employees, slowly rolled her cart past. Loud enough for everyone to hear, she said, "This ain't right. I've been buying my grits here for 15 years. That boy helped me carry a watermelon to my car last week. Ain't nobody in here causing trouble but you." Laughter rippled through the crowd, not mean but real, the kind that signals shared understanding. Even Terrence, now fully out from the stockroom, called out, "Man's just doing his shift, officer. Maybe the person you're looking for ain't the one with a name badge and a barcode scanner." Huxley shifted his weight, looked around again. Finally he took a slow step back. He didn't apologize. He didn't even say goodbye. He just muttered something that sounded like, "Keep it professional," then turned on his heel and walked out of the store. The automatic doors slid open and closed behind him, but the silence inside remained. Tanya turned to Ronell. "You good?" He nodded once. "Yeah. I'm good." She reached into her back pocket and pulled out her phone. "Clock out for 30. Go outside. Breathe. Come back when you say you're ready." He hesitated. "You sure?" She nodded. 100%. Julian walked over, extending a hand. "You handled that with a lot of grace, young man. A lot of people would have lost it. You didn't. That matters." Ronald shook his hand, his grip steady. "I appreciate that," he said. "But I shouldn't have had to." As Ronald stepped outside for air, he didn't know that what had just happened wasn't the end. It was the start of something much bigger. Ronald sat on the edge of the loading dock behind the store, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tight. The sky was darkening, early evening light carving sharp shadows across the back lot. A soft breeze rustled the trees, but his mind was too loud to notice. He'd never smoked, but in that moment he understood why people did. Something to hold, something to do with your hands when your insides were too full. Inside the store, Tanya had locked the office door. She stood at the small desk, security monitor glowing, Julian Ocampo leaning in beside her, both watching footage from 15 minutes earlier, Huxley's entry. Tanya scrolled through camera angles. Produce aisle, break room, hallway, overhead view of the registers. "He came in already focused on him," Tanya observed, exhaling through her nose. "Didn't even glance left or right." Julian nodded slowly. "He never paused, never scanned the room. That's what'll hurt him in a review. He wasn't investigating. He was targeting." Tanya clicked pause. "I'm not gonna let this slide." Meanwhile, near the parking lot, a small group had gathered by the cart return bench. Not a crowd, just a few customers who hadn't left, people who'd witnessed the whole scene and weren't quite ready to let it go. Camille Torres, a night shift nurse at Regional Medical, stood with her phone, uploading the video she'd captured of Julian stepping in. "I'm tagging the department," she told Reggie Boone, a UPS driver. "They're not gonna pretend this didn't happen." "Send it to the Ledger too," Reggie added. "They'll run it. My cousin interned there, said they don't play with this kind of stuff." By the time Ronald came back inside, less than 20 minutes later, 3 different angles of the altercation had already begun to circulate. The one filmed by the teenager near the oranges gained the most traction first. A clean shot, full audio, 34 seconds long. It showed Ronell standing still, Tanya speaking up, and Julian shutting the whole thing down with one calm sentence. The caption read, "Guy just trying to stock veggies and gets hassled by a cop for being black. Not today." It had over 2,000 shares in the first hour. Back in the store, Ronald was met with quiet nods and gentle touches on the shoulder, the kind of solidarity that needed no grand display. Mrs. Harmon approached him again. "You handled that like a grown man," she said, patting his wrist. "Your mama should be proud." He offered a small, tired smile. "She'd say I need to get back to work." Mrs. Harmon chuckled. "Don't we all?" But the moment wasn't over. It kept growing. A college student named Latrice Morrow, who had been recording near the frozen foods, took to TikTok with a calm, even retelling of what she saw. Her closing words resonated. "What if we hadn't been there? What if no one had spoken up? That's what scares me. Not just what happened, but what could have happened." That clip blew up faster than the original, reaching 500,000 views, then 1 million within hours. The comments section exploded with stories. Personal encounters with officers, admissions of disbelief, and most powerfully, comments from local witnesses. "I shop at this store every week," one read. That guy always helps me bag groceries. Never caused nobody any problems. Another, my nephew used to work with Ronald. Said he's the quietest, most respectful dude on the team. The story had left the walls of Maplebrook Market. It was now public. Even as the story gained traction, Ronell knew what came next wouldn't be applause. It would be pressure. And it was already on its way. By 7 a.m., Officer Trent Huxley sat alone in his cruiser, parked outside a Sunoco station off McClellan Boulevard. His hands weren't on the wheel but clasped around a cold, unopened bottle of water. The pale glow of his dash-mounted laptop illuminated his uniform. On the screen, tabs were open. Social media, news alerts, and internal department message flagged red. He'd underestimated the impact. He'd thought maybe he'd scare the kid a little, move on, feel like he was doing real work. Something to prove he wasn't just writing tickets. Instead, he'd walked into a store and now had the entire city watching. He played one of the many circulating videos again. There he was, demanding ID from a man stacking vegetables. No explanation, no calm, no probable cause, just force. And then people pushing back. Not violently, not disrespectfully, but confidently, intelligently. In the background of one clip, a voice. We know what this is. Same thing we've seen 100 times, just filmed this time. That line stuck with him. At headquarters, the phones had started ringing non-stop around 6:15 a.m. Calls from community members, local news, even a Birmingham-based reporter demanding an official statement. Sergeant Alonzo Patrick, the duty officer, was not pleased. You stirred up a hornet's nest for no reason, he told Huxley bluntly over the radio. You better have a clean report or you'll be lucky to be sitting behind a desk by Friday. Meanwhile, inside Maplebrook, things were still shifting. Tanya sat in the break room, phone pressed to her ear, pacing near the vending machine. He was talking to corporate. Of course I support him. He didn't do anything wrong. He was working, for crying out loud. Pause. Yes, I understand it's getting media traction. I think it should. We always say we're a store built on community. Well, this is our community. She hung up, exhaled deeply, and glanced at the employee bulletin board. A flyer for next month's canned food drive fluttered in the AC vents breeze. Out front, Ronell was back on the floor. He had insisted. I don't want to sit in the back and hide, he'd said. I want to finish my shift. So he went back to lining up cans of evaporated milk as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Customers looked at him differently now, not with suspicion, but with recognition, as if they'd truly seen him. One woman, Miss Tilda Knox, quietly dropped a note in the suggestion box at customer service. It read, "That young man deserves a raise, and whoever the manager was today deserves one too." At 8:03 p.m., another cruiser pulled up, not Huxley's this time. It was Sergeant Patrick. He walked through the front entrance as if he didn't want to be there, tall, salt and pepper hair, sleeves rolled up. He scanned the store, spotted Tanya at the front desk, and walked over. Miss Belrose? I'm here to speak about the earlier incident. Tanya straightened. With Officer Huxley, yes. Yes, ma'am. I reviewed the footage. I've spoken with the officer. I want to make it clear we're taking this seriously. Tanya didn't flinch. Are you apologizing? Patrick looked like he chewed on the word for a moment. Not officially yet, but I'm telling you the review's been escalated and we'll be in touch. Behind him, customers were still shopping, business as usual, but the store had subtly, firmly shifted into a place where silence no longer lived. Ronald stood 2 aisles down, quietly watching. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Patrick saw him, gave a slight nod, then left. No sirens, no lights, just another car pulling away. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. The internet had already picked up the story, and now eyes from far beyond Anniston were paying attention. By the next morning, Anniston had transformed from quiet suburb to trending hashtag. What began as a local confrontation in a grocery store had exploded overnight. Ronald's name was now linked to phrases like, profiling in broad daylight, targeted while working, and why cameras matter. He didn't even have a Twitter account, but that didn't stop his face from appearing across feeds. A screenshot from one of the videos. Him standing still, barcode scanner in hand, the officer in his face, was everywhere. Some users framed it as resilience, others a stark warning. One tweet read, "He didn't raise his voice, didn't move a muscle, and still he was treated like a suspect. America 2025. Another, If Julian Ocampo hadn't been there, how different would this story be? Think about that. By noon, the video had reached national accounts. Activists, community organizers, even a few public figures reposted it. A former state senator called it an all-too-familiar American scene. A local pastor from Tuscaloosa shared it with the caption, "Watch this and tell me we don't still have a problem." But the impact went beyond words. The Maplebrook corporate office in Birmingham held a Zoom call that morning. Tanya was strongly encouraged to attend. It lasted 23 minutes. They wanted to know if she had handled the officer professionally. She told them the officer hadn't handled himself professionally. They asked if any policy was violated. She answered, "By us or by him?" The call ended with corporate pledging to monitor the situation closely. Back at the store, Ronell was off that day. Tanya had insisted, "Take a day, man. You've earned it." He didn't argue, he needed time to breathe. But even from his small apartment on the west side of town, there was no escaping the coverage. His sister Kaylin called from Nashville. "I just saw you on TikTok. That was wild. You good?" "I'm all right," he said, though his voice sounded flat. "Everyone's sharing it," she said, "like everyone. Even some folks from back in high school. They're proud of you." "I didn't do anything," Ronell replied. Kaylin paused. "You stood there, calm, in front of someone trying to rattle you. You didn't give him what he wanted. That's something, Ron. That's everything." He appreciated it, but it didn't change how strange it felt waking up to a world that suddenly knew his name, not for anything he built or created but for how he didn't break. Julian Ocampo, on the other hand, had spent his evening writing an op-ed for the Anniston Ledger. He'd called in a favor from an old editor friend and emailed it at 1 a.m. It was published online by sunrise. In the piece he didn't mention names, not Ronald's, not the officers, just the facts. "We've spent too many years asking the same questions. Why was he approached? Why was there no cause? Why did it take a room full of cameras to force the truth out? But this time it was different. Because people spoke. Because a manager stood up. Because a community didn't look away." The piece was shared over 10,000 times in less than a day. Teachers in nearby counties printed it out and brought it to class. Church groups discussed it during Bible study. It hit a nerve not just because of what happened but because of what could have happened. That was the echo now. What if the cameras hadn't been there? What if Tanya had been on break? What if Ronell had gotten scared and raised his voice? Would the story have ended differently? People weren't just talking, they were watching, listening, processing. The Anniston Police Department issued a formal statement late that afternoon. "We are aware of the incident at Maplebrook Market involving one of our officers. A formal review is underway. We remain committed to fair and respectful community policing." No apology. No mention of Ronell. No accountability. Still, the department's comment section was flooded. People weren't buying it. One reply read, "You had a chance to say something real. Dad, you said nothing." Loud. But Ronald wasn't interested in the online noise. What concerned him most was how this would shape his life offline. And that was about to get very real very fast. By Thursday morning, the city council chambers were packed. Not just with council members, but with ordinary residents who hadn't sat in those wooden benches since the town debated parking permits 3 years ago. This time they weren't there to talk policy. They were there because of what happened at Maplebrook. The council hadn't even planned to address it. It wasn't on the official agenda. But people showed up anyway, holding printouts of video stills, signs reading "Justice at the Job," and "Protect, Don't Profile." City Clerk Leona Brackett, 19 years behind that desk, whispered to Councilman Dwayne Tibbs, "This many people on a Thursday morning? You know something's boiling." By 9 a.m., Councilwoman Denise Harlan, a former teacher and longtime advocate for police reform, called an unscheduled 5-minute recess and stepped out to make a phone call. Nobody said who she called, but after she returned, the tone in the room shifted. Back at the Anniston Police Department, Officer Huxley sat in a cramped internal affairs office. The room was quiet, the carpet dull, the blinds drawn. He wore plain clothes now. No badge, no belt, no authority in sight. Sergeant Patrick was in the building too, one floor up. He wasn't saying much publicly, but internally he had already been briefed by the city attorney. "If this keeps getting traction," the attorney warned, "we're going to have a real liability issue, especially if Price decides to file." That was the word floating now. File. Nobody said lawsuit out loud, but it hung in the air like humidity. At the store, Tanya had just come off a call with HR. They wanted a written summary. She'd already written 3 versions. None felt like enough. She wanted them to understand. This wasn't a blip. It was a turning point. And Ronald was more than just an employee who'd been hassled. He was the mirror a lot of people didn't want to look into. Meanwhile, Ronald was still home. He tried to go out for breakfast, couldn't even finish his plate at Hank's diner because 2 different tables recognized him. One man offered to pay his bill, another asked to shake his hand. He left early. On his walk back, his phone buzzed. A number he didn't know. "Mr. Price," a voice asked. "Who's this?" "My name is Kirsten Bain. I'm with the Southern Liberty Foundation. We're a legal advocacy group based out of Memphis. We saw the footage. We'd like to talk to you about next steps." Ronald stopped walking. "Next steps?" "Sir. Whether you're interested in pursuing legal action or simply want guidance on how to protect yourself going forward, we offer both." He didn't answer right away. "You don't have to decide now," Kirsten said. "Just know that if you want support, you have it. You're not alone." He thanked her, took the number down, hung up. He didn't call back that day, but he saved it. Later that evening, the Anniston PD released a second statement, this time with more weight. Effective immediately, Officer Trent Huxley has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. The department will be conducting a review of protocols around community engagement and stop procedures. We appreciate the public's patience and input during this process. Still no apology, but it was the first real movement. Julian Ocampo read the statement on his tablet, sipping coffee at a corner table in a small downtown cafe. He smirked. "They always start with pending investigation," he said to the barista, who nodded slowly. But this time they had to say it publicly. By nightfall, local news outlets were leading with the update. Some national blogs picked it up too. The comments kept coming. Support, outrage, fatigue. But beneath it all, something else was growing. Pressure. And for the first time in a long time, the department felt it. Not because someone yelled, not because there was property damage, but because too many people watched and refused to forget. But even as the system began to move, slowly, reluctantly, Ronald's world was shifting in a different way. And not every change felt like a victory. The internet was loud, but Ronald's apartment was quiet. Too quiet. No TV, no music, just the ticking of the wall clock above his tiny kitchen table and the low clunk of the fridge every few hours. He'd sat there most of the afternoon, one foot bouncing under the table, his phone face down next to a half-drunk glass of water. It wasn't the attention that bothered him, it was how it made him feel, like he'd become something other people could use. A headline, a talking point, a post that made people feel righteous. Some messages praised him like a hero, others tried to bait him into outrage, and none of it made him feel any better. He hadn't asked to be brave. He hadn't trained for any of this. He just didn't want to hand over his ID without a reason. That shouldn't have been controversial. But now everything around him was heavier. Even small things like going to the store or answering the phone, or waking up in the middle of the night wondering what might have happened if Tanya or Julian hadn't been there. He still remembered the way Huxley's fingers hovered near his belt. That half-second, that muscle memory. It didn't haunt him exactly, but it stayed with him, quiet, lingering, like a warning he didn't want but couldn't forget. That night his cousin Brixton came by. No knocking, just walked in with a bag of takeout and a 6-pack of ginger ale. "I figured you didn't feel like cooking," Brixton said, dropping the bag on the counter. Ronald raised an eyebrow. "You figured right." They ate in silence for a few minutes. Fried catfish, crinkle fries, hush puppies from Joe's kitchen down the road. Finally, Brixton leaned back. "So what now?" "I don't know," Ronald said. "Part of me wants to go back to work, act like nothing happened. And the other part don't want to be the guy everyone stares at while pretending not to." Brixton nodded slowly. "You know this ain't on you, right? You didn't create this mess." "Yeah, but now I'm in it. And you handled it better than most would have. Doesn't mean it didn't mess with your head." Ronald looked away, chewing on that thought. He hadn't cried, not once, not even when it all hit the news. But he hadn't slept more than 3 hours at a time either. The next day Tanya called. "Hey, just checking in." "I'm all right," he said automatically. "I didn't ask if you're all right. I asked how you are." He paused. "Tired. Angry sometimes. Grateful." confused. Depends on the hour. That's fair, she said. You thinking about coming back? I want to. Well, just so you know, people keep asking about you. Customers, staff, even folks from the warehouse. You're not just a story to them. That's good to hear, Ronald said, though he wasn't sure what to do with it. I told corporate if they try to touch your hours or schedule, they'd have a different kind of video on their hands, she added, half joking. That made him chuckle, a real one. After the call, he sat at his window and watched cars pass on Sycamore Avenue. Same cars, same street, same mailbox with the missing flag. But everything felt slightly off, like his world had tilted just enough that nothing sat right anymore. He wasn't scared, not really, but he was changed. And that realization, that he had been pulled into something bigger than himself without permission, sat heavier than the event itself. He thought about Julian, about Tanya, about the people who spoke up, stood beside him, put their own names on the line. Maybe that's what got him the most, that he wasn't alone. That maybe, just maybe, he'd be alright eventually. But just as he began to find his footing again, something unexpected was about to remind him that even quiet resistance can leave loud echoes. On Monday morning, Maplebrook Market looked the same from the outside. Same beige walls, same flickering open sign, same chipped curb near the garden center. But inside something had shifted. At 8:55 a.m., a line of staff waited just inside the break room. Tanya stood at the front with a clipboard and a pink sticky note on her sleeve. Be cool, y'all. Don't crowd him when he walks in. Give him space. Ronald hadn't told anyone he was coming back. No post, no calls to the crew. He just texted Tanya 2 words, I'm ready. When he walked through the back entrance, wearing his navy work vest and carrying a microwaved sausage biscuit, it took him a second to realize everyone had paused. Terrence, Camille from the bakery, Alonzo from the night crew, they all stood still waiting for his reaction. Tanya broke the silence. Back where you belong. Ronald smiled, tight but real. Y'all better not be staring at me like that every day. That broke the tension. People clapped, not a big show, just genuine. A few back pats, a fist bump from Terrence, a low-key good to see you man from Alonzo, who rarely said much. In the front of the store, a cardboard sign was taped near the sliding doors. We stand with Ronald. Our team, our family. Someone had left sunflowers in a mason jar beside it. No one claimed credit. Around 11 a.m. Mrs. Harmon came in, wearing a big floppy hat and pushing her usual red cart. She saw Ronell bagging produce and made a beeline for him. You didn't think I was gonna let you sneak back in without saying hi, did you? Ronell grinned. Never crossed my mind, Mrs. Harmon. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It's from my grandson. He's 12. Watched the video with us. Wrote you a letter. Ronell opened it later during break. It read, Dear Mr. Ronald, thank you for being brave. My grandma said you stayed calm even though someone was being mean to you. I want to be like that too someday. Eli, age 12. That one hit him. Across town, in a quiet room at Greater Life Community Church, Pastor Marcellus Trigg brought it up during the Wednesday night meeting. We spend so much time talking about what we do in a moment of injustice, he told the circle of 18 people. But what I saw in that video, it wasn't just Ronald who showed courage. It was Tanya. It was the people filming. It was the silence that said, we see you and we're not going to let this slide. That's how community responds. The next Sunday, the church held a community meal. Ronell didn't go. Too many people, too much attention. But Tanya did, and so did Julian. Julian stood up near the end and said something no one expected. I don't want this to be the story of a bad cop and a brave employee. That's part of it, sure. But really, it's the story of ordinary people doing the right thing while it was still hard. And maybe that's what changes things. Not policies. Not protests. But people showing up in the moment. Quietly. Curry. Without blinking. People clapped again, not for show, just because it felt right. The department hadn't said much since their last statement. Officer Huxley remained on leave. Rumors swirled, but nothing confirmed. Some said he'd been pulled from street patrol, others that he was under pressure to resign. Ronald didn't care about that. What stuck with him more were the people who kept coming up to him, not just to say thank you but to share. A bus driver told him about a similar situation from years back. A cashier from the store across town said she'd started keeping her phone in her apron now. A high school kid came in, asked him to sign his lunch bag, then said, My teacher played the video in civics class. We talked about standing your ground. Ronald signed it, didn't know what else to do. The weirdest thing was how normal work felt again. Not all the way, but mostly. He still felt eyes on him, but they weren't watching him like a threat anymore. They were watching him like a reminder of what it means to be steady when you shouldn't have to be. But as the town exhaled and daily life resumed, one question remained. What did Ronell take from all of this? And would he ever feel like just an employee again? A week later, Ronell sat at the small metal table outside Everett's Coffee on 6th Street, nursing a lukewarm black coffee, staring at nothing in particular. It was early afternoon, warm, a little too bright. Across the street, someone was cutting grass, the sound of faint buzz beneath the chatter of a few college kids. Normal life had rolled on, but inside his chest, something still sat heavy. He hadn't spoken to the media, not once. Turned down every call, every email, every quick interview request. He wasn't interested in being a symbol, he just wanted his peace back. But peace felt different now. Julian Ocampo joined him, 2 chairs scraping the pavement as he sat down with a sweet tea. He wore the same wire-rimmed glasses, same calm expression, like nothing rattled him unless it deserved to. "Didn't expect to see you here," Ronell said. Julian shrugged. "Didn't expect to be recognized at the grocery store by a woman who told me I reminded her of her uncle's tax lawyer." They both chuckled, it felt easy, real. After a moment, Julian asked, "So how are you really?" Ronell looked out toward the sidewalk, then back at his cup. "Better than I thought I'd be. Worse than I wish I was." Honest answer. Still not sure what to do with it, though. "I didn't do anything special, man. I just said no. I just stood there." Julian nodded. "That's exactly what was special." Ronell frowned. "I don't know if that's comforting or depressing. Could be both." They sat in silence for a few beats. "I've been thinking," Ronell said, "about how close it was. Like if Tanya hadn't come around the corner. If you hadn't stepped in. What if I'd said something wrong? What if I got upset? It could have gone a whole different way." Julian didn't rush to answer. "That's the part that scares me," Ronell continued. "That all it takes is one moment where someone decides you're wrong even when you're not. And if you're not lucky, if people don't speak up, you disappear into the system before anyone knows what happened." Julian folded his hands. "That fear you feel, that edge you're standing on, that's what too many people live on every day. You just had the misfortune of standing in the light when it happened." "Some light," Ronald muttered. "But here's the thing," Julian added. "You kept your balance. That's more than most. And now people saw it. People felt it." Ronald nodded slowly. "Yeah, but what do I do with that?" Julian looked at him. "Maybe nothing. Maybe you go back to work, live your life. Or maybe you speak when you feel like it, share when it matters. No pressure either way. But know this. What you didn't do mattered. You didn't back down. You didn't lash out. That shouldn't have to be brave, but it is." They left it there, finished their drinks, said their goodbyes. Later that night, Ronald stood in his kitchen scrolling through his phone when he saw a post from Eli, the 12-year-old who'd written him the letter. His grandmother must have helped him set up the account. It said, "I want to be calm like Mr. Runell when people are mean. That's what strength is." Simple, but it hit harder than any news headline ever could. Ronald put his phone down, leaned on the counter, and just breathed, deep, slow. He didn't ask to be anybody's example, but maybe being one for a kid like Eli wasn't the worst thing. He still didn't know what would happen with Officer Huxley or with the department, or with the system that kept moving. Like this story was just one small wave in a much bigger sea. But he knew this, he wouldn't forget. And he wouldn't let it make him smaller. Because standing still in that aisle when every instinct said to flinch, to fold, to flee, was the hardest thing he'd ever done. And now he knew he could. Some moments find you when you least expect them. How you show up in those moments, that's what defines you. If this story moved you, speak up. Not just online, in real life for real people. And if you ever find yourself watching someone else being cornered, don't stay quiet. Be there. Be Tanya. Be Julian. Subscribe for more real stories that remind us what courage actually looks like.